Hello guys, you're welcome to this channel Sew with Ocean. Today I'll be teaching you how to cut and sew a kaftan or senator placket. Please, if this is the first time you're visiting this channel, click the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell. And if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Thank you, and let's get started. So this is my placket interfacing. I'm using collar gun for the placket interfacing, and I'll be adding another soft cloth gum to it to make it thicker. So the width of the placket is 2 1/4 inch, whereas the length is about 16 inches. So I'll be applying it here now. So talking about the difference between pressing and ironing. When you press, you place the iron on a particular spot for some seconds, and then you shift to another position for some seconds. But when you iron, you move the iron left, right, front, back. So that's ironing. So the best method of applying heat sensitive interfacing is the pressing method. So you press in order for the heat to penetrate the glue on the interfacing, and then it sticks to the piece on which you are applying it on. So let's try to use a tandem block if you have one. Like I said, I'm going to make it double with a lighter interfacing. This one on top is a light cloth gum because I want the placket to be thick. So what the pounding block helps you to do is to remove the steam and make whatever you are using under it smooth. So after that, I'm going to fold the allowance. Ensure you use the pounding block. So to get this shape, I'm going to iron from the back instead. So but while doing that, please ensure you are folding on the edge of the interfacing. There shouldn't be any space between the edge of the piece and the edge of the interfacing. So ensure you are folding it at the edge of the interfacing. From the edge of the placket, I'll be marking out the seam allowance, which is 5/8 inches. So I'm going to cut that out. Like I said earlier, the seam allowance to sew the placket is half the width of the placket. The width of the placket here is 1 1/4 inches, and 1 1/4 inches divided by 2 is 5/8 inch. So this is the allowance to sew the placket. Using half the width of the placket for your seam allowance will make your placket centralized. I'm going to reduce this part a little bit, since the length of the placket, the opening on the neck is about 10. I'll measure about 12 inches and reduce this area. It's about 1 inch width. You can see that. I'm going to apply hemming gum beneath, and then I'll be folding about 3/4 inch. So around that corner, I'll make sure I fold it more. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Ensure you don't leave the edge straight like this. You fold it at least 1/8 inward. I'll be folding the bottom by 3/4 of an inch. Ensure it is straight. So this is the reason you fold the edge inward, so that when you fold back, the edge here does not show on both sides. I'll still apply hemming gun beneath. So this is the placket, precisely the overlap. So I'll be applying the underlap. The underlap width of the placket is 1 inch and the length is 11 1/4 inches. So like I said, the difference between pressing and ironing is that when pressing, you place the iron on the particular spot you want to press and you leave it there for some seconds, minding the temperature on which you have set the iron, and then you also take it to another position, also minding the temperature. The reason for doing so is to enable the heat of the iron melt the glue on the interfacing, and then it sticks to your fabric. So you fold the raw edge, so it was applied 1/2 inch away from the raw edge to enable you fold a 1/2 inch over. Ensure you use your pounding block. So mind you, if you are using some other fabrics, you need to use your pressing cloth on them so that they don't shine. My seam allowance here is 1/2 inch because the width of my placket is 1 inch, so 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. This is the underlap and this is the overlap. To stitch the placket, I'll be using a depth of 9.5 inches and then I'll mark about 8 inches upwards. So the width of the placket is 1/1/4. So since the width of my placket is 1/1/4, this is the center front. So my seam allowance here is supposed to be 1/2 of the placket. The seam allowance of the placket, it's 1/2 the width of the placket. So if the placket width is 1/1/4 inch, then 1/2 of it is 5/8 inches, 5/8 inch rather. So the seam allowance for the placket is supposed to be 5/8 inch, but I'll mark 1/2 inch here instead because I don't want to clip it excessively. So I'll also mark 1/2 inch for the underlap. So I'll mark this diagonally. So slash it open up to that point, and this is the underlap 1/2 inch, and then the overlap, which is supposed to be 5/8 inch, I'm still clipping at 1/2 inch so that when I'm stitching it I can snip the remaining 1/8 inch so that I don't cut it excessively. I'll be applying little hemming gum. Alright, so first of all, we're going to stitch the underlap, but ensure you pass your machine head over the cloth you're seeing. So I place it beneath like this, and I'm stitching with a seam allowance of half an inch, and I also need half inch upwards, half inch seam allowance to finish the raw edge upwards. So ensure you are sewing half inch seam allowance. Maintain your seam allowance. If you cannot, just mark them and ensure it's half inch. Now, one of the ways through which you can maintain your seam allowance is to actually check the distance between the presser foot edge and the raw edge of the garment you're making, or the edge of the garment. Or if the throat plate of your machine is calibrated, like mine is calibrated, this part is half inch, so it can be a guard. So now, while sewing, I talked about tensioning. To tension is to stretch, a little stretch like this, and also the one down, a little stretch. Although the fabric down, I applied interfacing on the crosswise grain, so there may not be any challenge with it, but the one up, you just stretch. Make sure you secure it and it's not loosed, because as you're sewing, it is gradually wrinkling. In order to sew your plackets and get it very correctly, make sure you tension the up while sewing. And apart from that, also support with your hands. While sewing, you support with your hand this way. Finish the up with a seam. Form a crease. A crease is a line obtained after folding a piece. So either use your iron to iron this, or you just use your hands to do that, so you can see the line. So you can open it and form it the more. To use your pencil to still further mark it. Ensure you're not stitching on the neck piping, so you stitch outside of it. So your sewing should be outside the crease at the allowance area. And when stitching, ensure that the under, which is the facing, doesn't show. Ensure it overlaps properly, otherwise it will ruin your job. So I'll stitch, I've properly aligned, and I'm going to stitch. So at the end, ensure that you reinforce, so you can reduce the seam allowance, and then you turn. When you turn, you use your screwdriver to push out the points. To top stitch, ensure that the edge of the top seam allowance is not showing like this on the right side. You force it in using your screwdriver. Force it in. The technique also of tensioning is also applied here. Like I said, this underlap was gummed and cut on the crosswise grain, so the crosswise grain does not wrinkle fabric when you are sewing it. You make sure that the down thread, the under doesn't show, the seam line doesn't show, as in like this. Make sure it overlaps properly and it's well covered. So you stitch forward and then you back stitch. You also have to tension, make sure it's not wrinkling. And when you cut your placket on the crosswise grain, it doesn't give much challenge of wrinkling around here, just like this. But when you cut it on the lengthwise grain, like the overlap which I did, it gives challenge of wrinkling. So take note of that. You can see this area is not wrinkled at all. So you stitch like that. Try to support it from the back to avoid wrinkling. So sew below and then back stitch, you turn. So you try to stitch over this part. So you come a bit, and we're done with the underlap, you can see it. So if you wish to top stitch this area, you are free to do that, but I won't be doing that. I'm going to use the pencil to mark the seam allowance like this. So this is my seam allowance, which is 5/8 inch. I'll be placing it at that point, 1/2 inch, which is the top seam allowance. So I'll place on my back stitch. Since I cut this overlap on the lengthwise grain, I have to be very careful to stretch, to tension this part down here. I have to tension the bodies down here like this. Don't just allow it to be on its own, it will wrinkle. So while sewing, you tension it, and then the one over it, which is the placket, you also secure it in place. So you tension, you place this placket, and then you secure it, make sure it's not loosed, and then you can stitch by supporting the allowance from behind. Support it to move so that it doesn't wrinkle. So this is just the tensioning method that enables your placket to be very neat, devoid of wrinkles after sewing. So always support it from behind after tensioning, and ensure you mark and follow your seam allowance in order to be very accurate. Follow your seam allowance. So at the end you reinforce. So you can see this part. Actually, when I was cutting it open, I told you I was going to end 1/8 inch before the width of the allowance, which is 5/8. So instead of clipping at 5/8, I clipped at half. I always do this. Even if my seam allowance for the placket is 1 inch, I will clip and stop at 7/8 inch, because if you clip and you clip above or you clip beyond the required seam allowance, it's going to give you problem, a very huge challenge trying to amend it. But I prefer clipping 1/8 to the end of the width of the allowance, and then after sewing I just come back to snip it slightly, just snip it slightly to the end, so this doesn't give me any challenge at all. To pull it over to the right side. So this is how it is at the top. So we're going to form the crease to ensure that the neckline is also straight and not bend. So you can see that. So you form a crease that way. You can see it's straight. So you can open it up this way and then form your crease very well. If you don't mind, you can use your iron, but I think this is okay. The crease is this folded part. You can see that it's traceable. So that's the part I'll be sewing on. Turn it I'll be stitching on this part, not directly on the crease, but after the crease at this allowance area. So like I said, ensure that you don't do this. Don't allow the facing, the wrong side to show. Ensure that you overlap it properly, and if you're having any excess, you ensure you adjust the facing part of it, and then you can start seaming. Remember to reinforce and don't stitch on the tight neckline. Inside out. As you can see, it follows the neckline. Ensure this allowance is up. It shouldn't be beneath the piping. It should be above the neckline, on top of the neckline. To top stitch the overlap, you measure this is about 10 inches, so we're going to start stitching from that point. 10 inches. We'll start stitching from there. So top stitch about 1/8 inch from the edge of the placket. You can stop a 1/4 inch from there. So continue. Ensure the edge of the seam allowance at the top is not showing. So use your screwdriver to conceal it, push it inside. So you stop 1/8 inch away. So you pull this side out. The tensioning technique continues. You can see due to the tensioning we did initially, this part of the bodice, the allowance here is not wrinkled, it's smooth. So it doesn't mean we should just allow it to be like that. Now that we want to top stitch, make sure you secure it, also tension it, but this time not as much as you did before, and then continue stitching gradually. So you keep stitching that way. So this is the delicate part, so you have to be very careful to ensure that your placket is not bent, the raw edge there is not showing. So, and this is the center of my placket. I hope you can see that. And this is the crease. I have to form a crease here to guide me. So this is the center. You can see that the placket is right at the center. So we continue stitching. Alright, so when you get to about 3/8 inch to the end, so that's how you want to stitch completely, you can do that. Before you continue sewing, pin the plackets, align the plackets and pin it. Make sure it is aligned at the neck. Make sure it's well aligned. at the neck. So when that is done, you can turn. Begin to top stitch. So reinforce at the end. This is how it is. We're going to give it a nice press, iron it very well. So in case you have your pockets, your patch pocket, you position your patch pocket 8 inches from the shoulder point at the base of the neck. So you measure 8 inches from there down to the pocket position. The standard is usually 8 inches, but if you have not finished the shoulder, you take 8.5 inches. So also ensure you are tensioning the down part, the cloth. Ensure you are tensioning while you are sewing so that it doesn't wrinkle. If you allow it to move on its own without tensioning, you're going to have lots of wrinkles around the seam line. So that's why tensioning during garment construction is very, very important. It's not just to drag, just it's a little force applied to it. So you can see the level of tensioning. Just secure it in place and remove. Reinforce at the end.